After the odd encounter with the mysterious man, I quickly returned to Aunt Jane's room and sat beside her hospital bed. My mind was racing, replaying every word he had said and every unsettling smile he had given to me. I didn't realize how easily he had taken my full attention until the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor registered in my ear as if reminding me of the fragile situation I had at hand. As my senses slowly returned to the harsh reality, I instinctively reached for Aunt Jane's hand, hoping to draw some comfort from her familiar warmth, as I always did when life became overwhelming to me. But, instead of the reassuring warmth I sought, her hand felt cold and frail, a stark reminder of her precarious state. Panic instantly surged through me, and my chest tightened with a mix of fear and helplessness. The reality of her condition hit me harder than ever, shattering any illusion of normalcy I had in mind. I struggled to steady my breathing as I tried to calm the whirlwind of emotions coursing inside me. And the soft whirring of machines and the sterile scent of the hospital room only heightened my anxiety. Feeling lost, I gently squeezed Aunt Jane's hand, silently begging her to give me some sign of strength, some hint that she could hear me and that she was still fighting for me. For us. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. The coldness of her hand was unnerving, and I couldn't shake the feeling of the impending doom lurking just around the corners. My eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for something, anything, that could reassure me. But there was nothing. Just the empty white walls, the steady hum of the machines, and Aunt Jane, lying so still. I felt a lump form in my throat as tears welled up in my eyes. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming, and the weight of the situation bore down on me. Before, I was always a firm believer that in every difficult situation, if you tried hard enough, there was always a way out. But now, staring at Aunt Jane's fragile condition, I don't think that was applicable, and I felt utterly powerless and hopeless. Then, as I got drowned in the harsh reality I was in, my thoughts suddenly reverted back to the mysterious man and his unusual offer. His words replayed in my mind, each one dripping with a sinister allure. The Midnight Library. A job that promised a handsome salary. A way out of this nightmare. But at what cost? I shook my head, trying to dispel the nagging temptation. It felt wrong, dangerous even, but the memory of Aunt Jane's cold, frail hand kept intruding, reminding me of how desperate our situation was. The minutes dragged on, my internal conflict growing more intense with each passing second. Dr. Armstrong had made it clear that without a transplant, Aunt Jane's chances of survival were slim. The thought of losing her was unbearable to me, and the truth about our financial constraints only compounded the dread. Suddenly, as thoughts battled in my head, Aunt Jane's breathing hitched. Her body tensed, and her eyes fluttered open, revealing a pained expression. The heart monitor's beeping quickened, becoming a frantic, erratic symphony disturbing my ears. Panic surged through me, but this time it was different. Then my instinct took over, and I quickly rushed outside the room. I screamed repeatedly, my voice echoing down the empty hallway as I cried for help. Then I hurried back inside and grabbed Aunt Jane's hand tighter, willing her to hold onto mine. I pathetically begged for Aunt Jane to stay with me countless times, my voice cracking and tears streaming down my cheeks. Within moments, a team of doctors and nurses burst into the room. The lead doctor, a tall man with kind eyes, assessed the situation with a swift, practiced gaze. "She's going into cardiac arrest. We need to stabilize her now. Call Dr. Armstrong quickly," he commanded one nurse inside, his voice steady despite the urgency. Dr. Armstrong arrived in no time and took the lead. Then afterward, the room erupted into controlled chaos. The nurses adjusted the machines, administered medications, and prepared the defibrillator. I was pushed to the corner, my back pressed against the cold wall as I watched in helpless terror. The scene felt surreal, like something out of a nightmare. "Clear!" Dr. Armstrong shouted, placing the defibrillator pads on Aunt Jane's chest. Her body jolted with the electric shock, but the heart monitor's erratic beeping continued. Dr. Armstrong repeated the process, each shock a desperate attempt to bring Aunt Jane back. "Come on, Jane, stay with us," he urged, his face tense with concentration. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the heart monitor finally steadied, the beeping returning to a more regular rhythm. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. "She's stable for now," Dr. Armstrong said, turning to me. His expression softened. "We'll move her to the ICU for closer monitoring. She's a fighter, Mallory, but we're not out of the woods yet." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The medical team prepared to move Aunt Jane, and I followed them, my heart heavy with fear and uncertainty. As I watched Aunt Jane being wheeled away, my mind drifted back to the mysterious man and his offer. The fear of losing Aunt Jane, coupled with the stark reality of our financial situation, left me feeling cornered. The mysterious old man's offer seemed like a dangerous gamble, but it was the only option I had at the moment. Once Aunt Jane was settled in the ICU, I found a quiet corner of the hospital to gather my thoughts. I pulled out the business card and stared at it, the words imprinted in it were staring back at me. Taking a deep breath, I finally made my decision. For Aunt Jane, I would face whatever lay ahead, even with how dangerous or uncertain things would be. After taking my time to reflect on everything that was happening, I steeled myself to see Dr. Armstrong and requested him to proceed with what was needed for Aunt Jane's heart transplant, knowing the immense financial burden it would bring. His eyes held a mix of sympathy and understanding as he nodded, promising to do everything in his power to expedite the process. With that weight lifted slightly, I made my way back to the ICU. Standing outside Aunt Jane's room, I took one last look at her peaceful face, praying silently for her strength. The enormity of the decision I made was suffocating, although it gave me some sort of comfort that everything would be all right, but it was still not enough. Because deep inside, I wanted a stronger reassurance that Aunt Jane would be really okay. And I don't want to be reminded again of how close I had come to losing her. And now that I'd given Dr. Armstrong the go signal to proceed with the heart transplant, all we had to do was wait until we found a suitable donor in time, then for me to go and seek the old man for his job offer. But could I really trust him? Was I willing to risk the unknown for just a glimmer of hope? What if it was just some sort of scam? And how in the world he had known me and my situation? The questions swirled in my mind, each one bringing a new wave of doubt. My heart pounded as the thought of the mysterious man's offer gnawed at the edges of my mind. It was strange, cryptic, and probably dangerous. Yet, amid my desperation, it felt like a lifeline, a chance, however slim it may seem. With that in mind, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the business card again, the words written on the small piece of paper, glaring up at me. It felt heavy, almost like a lead weight in my hand. The address was scrawled in an elegant script below the name. I couldn't tear my eyes from the business card in my hand, and there was a bizarre feeling swirling inside me, telling me that something strange yet familiar was awaiting me. Feeling determined about my decision, I pulled myself together and glanced back at Aunt Jane, who was lying so still and fragile in her hospital bed. Then, taking a deep breath, I tucked the card back into my pocket and made my way out of the hospital, my steps heavy and purposeful.